My presentation is on my master's project, which is incomplete, but you'll get to see some proposed steps and what I've done so far. It is on mapping Puget Sound land cover and relating it to shoreline ecological function. Yep. So this relationship between land cover and ecological function is already pretty well demonstrated in freshwater systems. Basically, as you change the percent of a watershed, say, in the land cover type, like if you adjust the amount of wetland, if you develop it, that will affect some abiotic parameters. That's these linkages here. It might, for example, change the amount of wooded debris that's in the watershed, or in water resources, which will in turn have effect on macroinvertebrate assemblage. So my goal is to do this in the Puget Sound. And I want to do this because all Washington state communities that have shoreline are required to have shoreline master programs which regulate that relationship, basically. The development has to produce no net loss of ecological function. So my goal is to develop a GIS to aid these cities in ensuring no net loss of ecological function. The steps involved in that will be first testing the ability of remote sensing to describe land use, and then modeling the relationship between land use and an ecological function. Here's my proposed workflow. Basically, I'll use about 70 small footprint aerial photos with some photogrammetry software to produce an orthophoto and a digital terrain model of the entire area of interest. And I'll conduct object-based image analysis, which is essentially developing an algorithm to automatically classify all those pixels into these objects of interest classes. I'll do some QA/QC at the end, and then at the end we'll pop a land cover map that I'll use for analysis and cities will use for regulation, hopefully. Here's a sample of the imagery that I'll use. 6-inch pixels, near-infrared reflectance is displayed as red here. A nice thing about this is that Kitsap and King counties regularly acquire this imagery every few years already. So here's a sample of the digital terrain model that I'm able to produce from this using photogrammetry software. This is possible due to the fact, again, that those small photos overlap. So there are thousands of points in between each photo that the photogrammetry software can identify. All those points are photographed from 2 different angles. It can use the location of those 2 different angles that it will detect to build a point cloud and then drape the surface over that point cloud. There's a lot more to be said about this, but I forgot now. So once I've got that digital terrain model, it measures the landscape. So it measures the structure of the landscape. So combined with the measure of the structure of the landscape and the spectral character of the landscape, the first step in the object-based image analysis is segmentation of this imagery into objects of interest. So basically, it takes the spectral and structural similarity of adjacent pixels and builds these regions and identifies borders between them. So now I've got the objects of interest. Next step is to classify them. That's a hierarchical classification based on statistics of each individual object. So basically, every object that's green and reflects near-infrared radiation highly, say that's vegetation. So out of all those objects, ones that are tall, call those trees. So there's my land cover map, and then I'll go back and do, again, the QA/QC, some manual classification and refining my algorithm. Once this is perfect, it'll never be perfect, but once it's close to perfect, then I'll start actually measuring the land cover from a point on the beach above it. I'll do a lot of different regression analyses actually between the land cover and some ecological function. Again, this is the relationship that I'm proposing to study, how changes in the land cover affect some kind of ecological function on the beach, which will in turn affect biota of interest. Salmon is what you can read in the Puget Sound mostly. Ecological function is a difficult term to define, much less measure, especially for a city. So the expectation is not for them to actually be measuring this on the beach all the time, but to hopefully develop a good model that they can assume that their regulations will be effectively ensuring no net loss. So the ecological function that I'll be studying is the amount of terrestrial rack that is deposited on the beach by that land cover above it. Terrestrial rack is basically plant matter, food source, habitat element that's been studied, measured by Megan Detier. This is what I'll do a lot of regression analyses. My predictor variable will be different geographic measurements of that land cover from points on the beach, and I'll show you a few of those. And then outcome variable will be, I'll relate it to, again, the terrestrial rack found on the beach. So a few of the different predictor variables that we've talked about are, this is actually a field site right here, a 50-meter transect. So is it the land cover above it and then past the bluff, or is it the land cover along the beach that more accurately describes the amount of terrestrial rack that you might find there. This is just a few notes on the practicality of this project. I've got to think about how cities could actually use it. Again, it's nice that the photography is already regularly acquired, but it does require a little bit of extra software. However, it's an automated process that can be easily replicated.